I know we're experiencing a little bit of cramped quarters tonight. This is kind of unexpected to have standing room only, but it's just kind of like an overwhelming experience. And we'd like to welcome all of you from the area schools as well as the community to this event. It is my honor to introduce to you Kitty Williams, who has actually lived in Council Bluffs for over 70 years. She rose to the position of Vice President of the U.S. Bank, where she was employed for over 30 years. And she is here tonight to share her real-life experiences in the Holocaust during World War II. And would you join with me in welcoming Kitty Williams?
Thank you so much for all of you to come, and I hope I won't disappoint you. Even though can you all hear me? That's great. You probably all wonder what an old lady, I'm 91 years old, what she's doing here instead of sitting in her rocking chair knitting socks. I found it maybe a little bit too late in life that I realized that how important is it for me to come and tell my story. I didn't even tell my children because I wanted them to be Americans like everybody else. And so they didn't know about my past until they were practically teenagers. And that's probably my biggest regret in life, that I didn't start. First of all, right after I came to this country, I came as a war bride, and people just weren't interested, and it was too fresh, and they sort of wanted to sweep it under the rug. They just didn't want to hear about it. That's the feeling I had, and so in 2009, somebody actually discovered me from the War Herald and wrote an article about me, and that's how it evolved into speaking engagements. And as you can tell, I'm not a seasoned speaker. I just happen to be an eyewitness and a person who lived to tell. So bear with me, and also, even this gentleman said that I've been here, over 70 years. I really tried to lose my accent, but I haven't succeeded, and I don't think I ever will. So you. Also, I just wanted to tell you the two reasons that I decided to speak. The first is because of all the denials you hear that the Holocaust never happened, and I needed to speak up because of that. And then the other reason is that there were 6 million Jews and 5 million other nationalities brutally killed during World War II, and they can't speak for themselves. And I feel that now that since I'm able to do it, I really try to do it for their sake as well. And I will quote Churchill. He said, and you all, of course, remember Churchill. He said, "Evil beyond evil was done and can be done again unless the living remembers." And I think that's so appropriate. And this is what we have to do. We have to keep it alive so it won't happen again. And I will tell you a little bit about my background, and then I will work it up to my experiences through the actual Holocaust. I was born in Hungary in a Jewish family. We were the only Jewish people in the town. It was a small community, a small farming community. And I had children, our siblings. I had six siblings. There were 7 of us. I was the youngest, and I would say that I had a fairly normal childhood, except that I lost my mother when I was 7 years old. So that changed things a lot. We always had anti-Semitism in Hungary, and it's something we had to live with, and we sort of, accepted it. There's something wrong with the microphone. Or is it something that I'm doing?
No, that's okay.
So whenever other kids would call me names, and I would go home crying, my dad would say, "But honey, it's when you think about what our ancestors for generations and generations that they went through, we have it so good." And there were always pogroms in other countries, or even in Hungary, and while we had a lot of discrimination by law as well, anti-Jewish laws, still it was a fairly decent life. And for instance, just to mention a few, in my childhood, during my childhood, like after I graduated from high school, I could not attend college because there was a quota system, and only 6% of Jewish people could go to college, and so all those who could attend were saved for the male population because they were supposed to be the breadwinners. So also by the time that I was a teenager, and probably started in the 1930s when Hitler came into power, and that influenced the Hungarian government a great deal because they were allies to the Germans, and so a lot of things affected our country as well, coming from Germany. There were also a lot of rumors about all the atrocities that were taking place in other countries, like in Poland, of course in Germany, and we just thought they were rumors only, and really so naive. We just couldn't imagine that could happen to people. But we certainly found out a lot more in 1944, when in March of 1944, the Germans invaded Hungary. And actually, there was a Hungarian welcome. They were really happy that the Germans came and actually took over the government right away and started almost every day. There were new rules, new laws against the Jews. Immediately, they ordered us to wear the yellow star on our clothes, on the outer clothes. We had curfews. All the stores or businesses were shut down. We only received half a ration. By that time, the war was well into several years, and food was getting to be scarce, and so we had food ration. So we could only get half of the ration because we weren't, considered really human beings. We had a curfew, only about 2 hours a day that we could be out on the street. Otherwise, we had to stay in our homes. But to turn in all our valuables, radios, it was, like I said, every day something new. Where the town crier would come in the town square and beating his drum and announcing what's happening to the Jews. It was all about less rights daily. And by then, my siblings were out of the house. I was the only one at home living with my dad. My two brothers were taken into forced labor, which was almost assured death, because they were using them to dismantle field mines. They would put them, the Germans were trying to invade Russia, and that's through Hungary and Romania. And these young Jewish men up to age 45, they all had to serve in this forced labor, wearing their own clothes, and they hardly fed them. They had very horrible conditions. I lost my a brother and a brother-in-law in the forced labor, and history shows only 10% of them survived. And one brother and some of his friends, they swam through a river, almost half-frozen river between Romania and Russia, and that's how they escaped to Russia, and that's how they stayed alive. And he just passed away a year ago, and also wound up in this country. While through the German occupation, I had a few incidents that I want to share with you, just to get the feel of it, that how we live. Sorry, I don't know what I'm doing, but it's moving, I think.
A little bit.
Yeah, or I am moving, one of the two. And for instance, we had our very own Kristallnacht. I don't know if you heard about it. It happened in Germany in 1939, when all the Jewish businesses and every Jewish home, all the windows were broken in during the night, and did horrible things to occupants. So one night we heard all this commotion outside, breaking windows, and my dad went to the front door, and there were a bunch of Hungarian hoodlums with German soldiers, and they demanded that I came out, that the German boys want me. And you can imagine the fear that my dad must have had, but somehow, because he spoke perfect German, and he explained to them that I am not home, I'm visiting one of my sisters, and they're welcome to come in, but they won't find anybody. Meanwhile, I was hiding under the bed, shaking. Mm-hmm. And so he talked him out of it, but after this, I never slept at home. Because there were also some really, really good people. There was an old man who was, when I refer to him as old man, he was probably, I'm sure he was much younger than I am now, but to me, he looked old. He didn't have much education, but he read the Bible, practically everything. He read it several times. And he used to come to our house every night because we got the newspaper from Budapest. That was the capital. And there was no other paper available. And so he would come over every night. And for years, he wanted me to read him the editorials. So we were, very close, and So he offered that I can sleep at his house. By then he was a widower, and he had a two-room house, a kitchen in his bedroom, and it was so cluttered. He even had some chickens in the house. It was spring, and they were sitting on the eggs to hatch chickens. So there was absolutely no place for me except under his bed. So I took a pillow and a blanket, and then when it was getting dark, then I snuck over, and that's where I slept. And the reason this is, I'm probably ahead of myself, but that when I tell you that years later, much later, that I went back to my hometown, I went back to Europe, to Hungary, and must have been in the early 70s. And I asked, I knew that, of course, that he would be dead, and I asked the neighbors. There were still several neighbors that, of course, that I went to school with them when they were neighbors, and I asked, how did he die and when did he die? And they said, somebody told me that he died soon after the summer I left, and he fought death. He said, I have to stay alive so I can see my neighbors again. But he finally died, but his last wish was that he be wrapped in the blanket that I left and with the pillow under his head. And this is so emotional for me that I can't even think about it or tell you without teared up, because it was just like I said, there were some really, really great people. And there were some others. I can't say that, everybody was happy to see what was happening to us. And there were a lot of rumors by then that Germany needed workers, that they were losing a lot of casualties in Germany, and that they were very short on workers. So it was a rumor, but we wanted to believe it, and it was almost a relief when finally we were able to, that we had to leave our homes. We left everything, thinking that, the war will be soon over and we'll be back and everything will be the same. Everything that happened, we were just so deceived. But like I said, it was almost a relief to be ordered from our house, and with police escort, we were taken to what they called a ghetto, and not the kind of ghetto that you know in this country. It was we were always surrounded with barbed wire fence. They had dogs, guard dogs. We were able to take 40 kilograms of clothes and food, and we were in several different locations, and of course food was getting just very short, and so when we finally, after 4 or 5 weeks sleeping on the ground, everywhere we slept on the ground, we were shipped out of the country. And this trip is, again, it's an unforgettable. You can never forget the trip. We had no idea where we were going, but we were glad to be going. And we thought it couldn't be any worse than what we were experiencing already. So they put us in these cattle cars, and if you're familiar with the cattle cars, they don't have much, much ventilation or a couple of little holes on the top, but no windows, and we were like sardines in a can. We had no place to hide and such a thing. We were on top of each other, and they gave us 2 buckets. One bucket was empty, and it was supposed to be our toilet. There were at least 70 to 80 people in the cattle car, and of course we ran out of water really soon. And at first, somebody had to go to the bathroom, to the bucket. We held up a towel or something, but you lost, all your sense of privacy and dignity by then. We didn't even, after a while, we didn't even do that. And every so often, whatever country we were going through, soldiers would come and open the doors and let us empty the bucket, and then they gave us, if we were lucky, they gave us new water. I don't know how we lived through it, and I don't know how many people died in the cattle car, because I just didn't look. I just didn't, I have no idea how many bodies went after, that we left in the cattle car after we arrived to our destination, and like everything that was happening, it was complete deceit. There was a large iron gate that you're probably familiar with it because it's been in the news just even recently that's the first thing we saw, and there were some letters in German saying "Arbeit macht you free," meaning that work makes you free. And it was such a deceit after what we experienced after we arrived. To get us off the train, we were greeted by these young men in striped prison uniform, and they ordered us off the train. Leave your bag, leave everything. You'll get it on the weekend. You'll get everything. Just get off the train. And they were brutal. And we found out later that they were actually, most of them were Polish Jews or some criminals that they got from jail. And they were our guards. They were called the capos. And, it just hard to even imagine that in spite of all this, they were organized so well that it wasn't a chaos with all these thousands of people getting off the train. But we did what we were ordered to do. We were so outnumbered that there was no way of fighting it, or we were just like like machines. We were following the orders. And we had to form 2 columns, one for the men, one for the female. Of course, so right away I was separated from my dad, and we heard the capos, they were the guards, saying, reassuring us that we will see each other on the weekend, but right now we had to be separated. And then ahead of us, because there was like miles of human beings, that in these columns, thousands of people. And on a platform, there was this immaculately dressed German officer in a white uniform with 2 huge dogs German Shepherd, I think, next to him, and he was directing people which way to go, which side. So I had to go to the right, and a lot of others realized that all the older people went to the left. Babies, mothers with babies, they were all sent to the left. And because I was still so naive, it seemed like all through those months and years that I was, in prison, I was kind of like Anne Frank. I'm sure most of you heard of her. Mm-hmm. I was still very naive and still believed that there is some goodness in people. So, but I think now they call it denial, and I think that's what I was in denial. Mm-hmm. But at any rate, none of it that was promised to us that we will see our family, or get our luggage back. It was just impossible to even imagine how that could be. But the ones that my age group, or probably from 15 to maybe 30, 35, we were led into, walked miles. I can't tell you how much, because we arrived at Auschwitz, and when they took us to Birkenau, which was a sub-camp, and that's where actually they put all the prisoners. And everywhere we were marching, there barbed wired people in enclosures, huge camps, and some buildings that just it was quickly put up, looked like to house all these newly arrived people. They were running out of room. So all around us, there were all these skeletons, human skeletons. I don't want to give anybody nightmares, but it was, they looked like skeletons. And they were yelling, "Where are you from?" in every kind of a language. But anyway, finally we arrived in a building where they disinfected us. They cut all our body hair. They searched us, searched our cavities to see if we're hiding any jewelry. And then they herded us into another room, saying that now we will have a shower. And there were already, some of the older women were saying, "Oh, I bet it's going to be gas." I thought, no such thing, that can't be. But finally we did get some cold water, which felt so good after for so long not having a bath or a shower. And everything was just so deceiving. They told us to tie our shoes together, so when we get out from the shower that we won't have to be, mismatched shoes. We will, the shoes will be tied together. They told us, remember where you hung your clothes, so you can find it when you come out of the shower. Because when we came out of the shower, our clothes everything was gone, and there were just rags and some wooden shoes, and most of them, didn't fit, and we exchanged between us. It was just the most comical almost sight, trying to cover our bodies. And from there, then we were led into our barracks, and it was a huge, like a barn that was put up, just looked like it was just freshly put up, made out of probably like plywood. And that's where, again, we practically slept on each other body, you just couldn't stretch out. It was no space. And that's the first time I experienced somebody right next to me went into a diabetic coma and died. And somebody came and pulled her out. But so you can imagine the condition that we were in. Well, the next day, we were given some supposedly coffee, which was made out of tree leaves, but at least it was liquid, and we got a dish that the dish became that was our most precious possession, because not only that we used it for, eventually we got some soup or this supposedly coffee in the morning, but we couldn't, at night, we couldn't leave our barracks to go to the latrines, which when I tried to describe to you, I know you can't even imagine what it was like. And so sometimes we used our dish for toilet. And the latrines that you had to wait in line for it, and it was a ditch, dug long ditch with a plank of wood on top, and that was our bathroom. And once a week they took us for getting disinfected. And again, I don't know how we all, not all of us, but most of us made it through. But we were young and very healthy. Again, this.
Yes.
I think maybe we'll need to do something.
It's okay.
Can you bear with me?
It's fine.
Try that, Jimmy.
Okay.
There you go. Oops. Why don't I just hold it? How's that? All right.
Thank you, except I don't remember where I was. And the days went by. We were counted twice a day, what they call self-will, and I never will understand why they were counting us, because what they had to balance too, because people were dying. It was every day the death wagons came and picked up the dead bodies. The fence around us was electrified, and some people committed suicide and purposely touched it, and they were gone. So and still you went on living. One particular evening, I remember, and in the night, we heard screaming like was just horrible, and help, help, please God, help, and it was just ear piercing, and we were actually able to go outside of the barracks, and the sky was just lit up. The flames, unbelievable. It's so tall, I thought it reaches heaven. And the people yelling, I hear all this, in German. And we didn't know who they were putting in the gas chambers. And actually, we didn't know that the gas chambers were that close to our barracks. But later, when I went back to visit Birkenau, Auschwitz, my barrack was still standing the first time I went back, and but they before the Germans left Auschwitz, before they evacuated Auschwitz, they blew up the gas chamber, so we could just see the outline of it, all that brick and everything, that there was a building. And it was maybe half a block from our quarters, so it was pretty close. And like I said, this was probably the only time that there was no doubt that what was happening, and yet I still couldn't believe it, that they were killing people. And these were families, because they left the gypsies. What I found out later, history shows that that was the night that they killed all the gypsies. Prior to that, they worked at the gas chambers and, all the hauling people out of the gas chambers and all that went with it. But that was sometimes in August of 1944. But we heard again all kind of rumors that the Germans need workers, and that if you possibly can volunteer for work, which we did, and I was accepted with 1,000 other women. And I didn't mention it before, but right after I arrived in Auschwitz, in the same camp, somebody recognized me and said, your sister is here. One of my sisters, I had 3 sisters, and my oldest sister was 12 years older than I am. She was pregnant. She was actually 9 months pregnant. She didn't live in the same town with me. And I said, what about the baby? What happened to the baby? And he said, well, the baby died in the ghetto, and but she's here. And after that, I moved in with her because, it didn't matter. The accounting, it was just a torture, actually, because it was done rain or shine. We had to stand and being counted for hours on end. And so I moved in with her, and that I had a purpose in life now. I took care of her, where our roles changed. She practically raised me, and then I took care of her. I became the adult, and she was the child. At the last minute selection to be taken out from to be going to work somewhere in Germany, they found out that she still had milk in her breast, and so she was separated from me. However, she did live, made it through more horrible conditions than I did. Because once we were shipped out of Auschwitz, still in a cattle car, but nothing like what we experienced before. We weren't, able to stand, and I remember that looking out the windows, we were able to even look out. And I saw civilians walking on the platform of the railroad stations, and I couldn't believe that, people still lived like that. I thought everyone was like us. Mm-hmm. It was just amazing to see that life went on the outside as normal as can be. And then we arrived at what, of course, at the time we didn't know, but the name of the town was Allendorf. And it was an industrial town, there was a munition factory, and that's where they were to work. We had fairly decent accommodations because it was built for German workers, but of course they didn't have the people anymore, the workers. So we were substituted for them, and my job was actually all of us to refill bombs that didn't they were defective, and they were so short on war material by then that they brought those in from the fields for us to take the filling out, and then they had remix them with, and use it again. So my job was, it was like an assembly line. They weighed about 100 pounds, and there was 2 or 3 of us could even move it, but I had a chisel, and that's what I had to chisel out the poison from those bombs. And everybody had similar job, like us, it went on the assembly line, and we all had different duties. And the food wasn't, we were always hungry, but we weren't starved. And at first it was even unbelievably good, because they gave us, at first, they gave us milk, I think, to counteract the poison that we were inhaling. We had no gloves or no mask, nothing. And by the time we were there for 5-6 months, our hair started turning yellow and kind of orangey, and our skin turned yellow. And I know that had not been so close to the end of the war that we couldn't have lived. We just it was close to the end by then. But we were so lucky that by then it was 1945, March of 1945, and there was a lot of activity up in the sky, and a lot of planes, and we knew that the enemy, their enemies, that were pretty close. Yes, of course, we couldn't wait for them to land and to take over. And one day I think it was maybe the 3rd week or the 2nd week of March of 1945, our camp commander ordered us to meet in the courtyard, and he announced that the enemy is very close, and that he and his staff will leave the camp. They're going more west into Germany, and we were free to go. But he said, you be careful, because there's still a lot of animosity out there, and just play it safe, and wished us good luck. So there were 20 of us roommates, and we decided we will stay together. And we roamed the fields and didn't dare go into town. We stayed in forest, or out in some barn or some building out in the fields. And on April 1st of 1945, we saw some trucks on the road, close enough that we could see them, but still pretty far. And we knew that it had to be either the English or Americans, and we waved. We got some white slip or something that one of us held up, and tried to flag them down, and they finally saw us. And when they saw us, they came out, drove over. They didn't know what to make of us. By then, we lost a lot of weight. We weren't quite skeletons yet, but we were in pretty bad shape, and I think that was their first encounter with anything like that. They were, to me, they were like children. They were so astonished. They didn't know what to do for us, and chewing gum that we never even saw before. There was no such thing in Hungary, and they just showered us with everything, and they took us to the nearest town, and they kicked out the German occupant, and they said, these people will have to, from now on, they're going to stay in your house. And of course, it wasn't taken very lightly by the Germans. So that I remember my first meal was in this German house. They were cooking small potatoes for the pigs, and in huge barrels, and nothing ever tasted so good than those potatoes. You can imagine. So after a few days, the Americans weren't it was an Air Force group, and they worried about us, and they asked us if we would be willing to work for them. It was nearby was an air base called town name was Fritzlar, and would we be willing to work for them? And of course we were more than willing, and so we took the job. There were, like I said, 20 of us, and each of us had different duties: cleaning the officers' barracks, or they just created the jobs, and they put us in a building, and we had guards in front, and we had bathrooms. We each had a room, and it was like a dream. And so that all of it was like unreal when I look back. But I still believe that my father was alive, and everything will go home, and everything will be just perfect. Well, I dreamt it, or I even saved. So we had so much food because we got packages, care packages, I guess it's called. And also, we could eat mess hall was open for us, whatever we wanted to eat. And so I remember there were a lot of sardines that we always, those care packages was full of sardines. And my dad did it was a delicacy at home. He just loved it, so I never ate mine. I really don't even like it to this day. But so I saved all the sardine cans. I mean, I had a stack of them in my closet in my room, and hoping, like I said, that and someday we'll go home and he will be there. And not until my other sister somehow or other found me. It wasn't easy because Germany was in ruins. I mean, there was no telephone or no transportation. All the railroad tracks were gone, and it was just in ruins. There wasn't a building that was standing. And somehow or other, through, word by mouth, somehow she found me. And when I was telling her that I'm saving all these sardines for our dad, and she said, "Oh, my little sister, that's not going to happen. He was killed the day that you arrived in Auschwitz." And I said, "How do you know it?" And she said that she actually, her job was sorting clothes. A whole group of Hungarian women, along with other women, they were sorting clothes that the people that were put in gas chambers dropped. And a friend of hers found its picture. I started passing it around, but anyway, I have the a copy of a picture that this woman found in a man's overcoat. And it was my sister's wedding picture that my dad carried in his pocket, and this woman recognized it, and so she said, so I know that he was killed, and she was telling me, opened my eyes completely, what went on in Auschwitz, Here I always smelled like burning flesh, but I justified it. It had to be garbage, it just couldn't be people. And the smoke, there was, I swear to you that I never saw a blade of grass or a bird flying over Auschwitz. It was the most desolate place on this earth. So, but I still believed. I still could not give up that hope. And I know that I could go on and on, but I would like to leave room for questions. But in closing, I want to tell you that the Holocaust, to me, even though there were so many other atrocities been going on ever since, the world was, that we exist. But it sets it apart from all the others ones, because to me, never in history that there were factories practically built, machines built to killing people, and the hate and the prejudice, and the religion and all this. Because of all this, there was all this genocide happened because of hate, and this is what I love, why I think it's so different to be from other atrocities, because in the name of this, 11 million were killed. At least that's that at least 11 million people were killed, and so I think it's if you just when you see discrimination, if we just speak up and just when you see injustice, don't be quiet, because we're all the same, really. We're all created the same. Inside we are the same, only the outside maybe we differ from one another. And just some statistics, kind of probably boring, but about my country, because I still say my country, because we were really Hungarians first and Jews was second, because we were so assimilated in the country that even to this day, when I hear Hungarian music, I tear up, because that's what was into our blood. It was just we were Hungarians, and so there was the statistic being it was 850,000 Jews lived in Hungary at that time, and 450 was shipped to Auschwitz. The other camps or were killed in other means, and out of the 450, 400,000 was killed immediately after arriving in Auschwitz. So it's now my last information I have that it's less than 10,000 live in Hungary. And I want to close it with something that I found somewhere. I read that it was written by Reverend Martin Niemöller, a German reverend, and it says, First, they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. And I want to thank all of you for being the most wonderful audience and for coming. My hope is that I didn't give anybody nightmares. It's a pretty gruesome story, and but I think it has to be told because it's very, very timely, and there's so much going on even as we speak. And now I'm open for questions.
When during this ordeal did they tattoo your arm?
The tattoo
When
on
did you get your tattoo?
Oh, I didn't.
Can I have a tattoo on when you're done with that?
You were talking about the, yeah. I don't have that because by the time we came, we were, they were in such a big hurry, they ran out of time. Most of my sisters, most everybody had, because they arrived earlier than I did.
Secondly, you're very active in the Holocaust Museum in Omaha. The center in Omaha for Holocaust.
Oh.
Museum.
All right. I think that you have a donation can here tonight for anybody who wants to contribute. I think those people are out there keeping up with the
Didn't quite hear you because I thought
He wanted
we
to
were-
put out a donation can to contribute to that organization.
Oh, that's really, really sweet of you, really. Thank you so much.
How did you meet your husband?
Actually, I worked as a waitress in the officers' mess hall, and
That same airfield?
the same airfield, and this one gentleman kept coming to always my table. And so he finally asked me for a date, and then he was discharged before we could get married. They didn't allow us to marry because even though I was by then was considered stateless because I really didn't have a citizenship anywhere, but because for whatever reason we didn't get. It was at the very beginning of the end of the war, and they did not allow us to get married. So anyway, he was sent home, and then he sent for me, and that's how I came here.
When did you meet up with your brother again? When did you meet up with your brother again?
Actually, I didn't see him until I was in this country for 20 years. He also wound up in as I said before, in this country. But I was so poor because, for one thing, our marriage didn't work out, and after 3 kids, I was left alone and got a job at a bank as a messenger girl, if you can imagine. I was by then around 30, and I had 3 children and to support. And I didn't know there was such a thing as welfare, but I mean, people were telling me, you can go on ADC and you can make more money than you can in a bank. To this day, I don't feel like the country's responsibility to support me when I was able to go to work. And so, it's not that I want to make myself out a hero, but there's something. It was my responsibility to support my kids.
Was there a question over here?
I just am curious, when you mentioned earlier that your children didn't know about your past, how old were they when you shared this with them? And how did they feel after you did share this with them?
Well, it's they were suspecting something because I had oh my goodness, he really that's just wonderful. That's just something never happened, and I spoke in many schools and universities. I am a little bit under the weather because I have some health issues. So, but at any rate, I really expected about 20 or 30 people here, and
That's what I expected too.
and only the library board or something like that. And little did I dream that this can happen. And I am so grateful, and I feel like I haven't done my best. I mean, I'm trying to do my best, but I do have some health issues now, I promise that I will do this. So if it's the last thing I do, but I have to do this, and I'm glad I did, especially to have that many people.
Question in the back.
Hello. First, I want to thank you for having the courage to speak of painful things to the group tonight. Your testimony is incredible. I had an uncle that I lost recently who was a liberator of Landsberg camp. So he's told me stories of what the American soldiers discovered when they got into the concentration camps, and it's unbelievable stories. But my question pertains to anti-Semitism. During the Second World War, much of America was strongly anti-Semitic, actually. And I was always shocked or wondered why America got involved in the South Pacific. Well, obviously Pearl Harbor was compelling at the time, but they dealt with North Africa, the South Pacific, everything before they dealt with the Nazis head on. So to me, that seems like America was ultimately not as concerned with the problem of the Jewish plight. What is your experience now as an American and a Jewish American? What is your experience of anti-Semitism? Do you experience it here? And if so, in what way do you experience it?
Well, it's pretty involved. When you ask about my kids not knowing, it actually, what happened is that while I was young and this is kind of private, but I have to tell you to understand that that it was. My decision of not to tell my kids that I was Jewish, because my husband in Germany, everything was fine. We were in love, and he couldn't live without me, and I probably thought I couldn't live without him. Mm-hmm. And like I said, he sent me home to fly here. He sent me to Germany to get me here. But then on the way home we met in New York, and he talking about anti-Semitism. He said to me, he says, "I want to ask you something for you to do for me. Don't ever tell anybody that you're Jewish and that you were in a camp." Because my family, and he had a good reason. He meant well, but this is when. He said, because my family would never accept you. So I kept it, and it was to deny your heritage. It's just, this was part of the reason probably that, not entirely, but it has something to do with our marriage not working out. Because this is, it was such a wedge between us. you don't think about it when you're young, the consequences, and actually I think it's so much improvement in comparison to when I first came, as far as anti-Semitism go. From what I see, I don't know, because now that I'm out of the closet, so to speak, I find it, I'm very not only accepted, you know. Then I met my second husband, and I told him I was Jewish. We were just dating, and he asked me to marry him, and he says, well, what changed? He says, I loved you before, why wouldn't I love you now? But there's a different in that personality, but I do find it is much better now. But I tell you, Germany probably is the best of all the countries now. They go out of their way, like they organized a reunion for us in the early 90s, late 80s maybe, to come, and somehow there was, like I said, 1,000 Hungarian Jewish women in this work camp, and somehow they were able to contact a lot of them. There were 333 came to the reunion from every continent. And it was just amazing, and they even put on kosher food. They brought in a rabbi, and they couldn't do enough for us. They paid for our way, my way. I took my kids, and but of course they only paid for me, and they provided hotel, food, and it was like a magic, a long weekend, and you could see the tears in the woman who waited on us, hand and foot practically. They had so much sympathy for us, and from what I hear, that they are the best as far as anti-Semitism go.
Back here.
How many years were you in Auschwitz?
I was only a year, because see, they didn't. Hungarians were allies, and they didn't come to get us. And finally, because we had like a prime minister, we didn't have a king, and he would not agree to export the Jews, and in fact, I just saw a film on it. Anyway, it's they imprisoned him. They asked him to come to for a conference to Germany, and they imprisoned him. They were going to kill his son if he doesn't cooperate and give up the Jews, and that's how come that it was so late for us.
Okay, right here.
When young kids come to hear you speak, like, what message do you try to deliver to them?
Well, I am trying to tell you that don't discriminate and speak up. It's just kind of like bullying. You know, if you let them win, that's the consequences. So that's all I could say. Speak up.
Right here.
You had there were 7 of you. So after you was liberated, how many were left? Your dad died, but how many of the 7 were alive?
Well, I was one of the most fortunate family. It's unheard of. Because except for my brother, I lost in the forced labor. We all lived one way or another. We all had different stories. One sister hid in Hungary. She lived in Budapest, but the rest of us were all in prison. But anyway.
6 of you left?
Yes, because now they're all gone because we're all old, and I was the youngest.
I have a question on this side.
Right here?
You said that you were the only Jewish family in your small town. How did your neighbors turn you in? How did they come to take you guys
Well,
away?
I don't know, did I touch the fact that, I think I skipped that because for instance, that I was out on a, some people, they still associated with us. There was no phone or anything like that, but somehow or other I had a girlfriend who asked me to go for a walk with her one Sunday afternoon, and I did. And and of course I wore everybody knew each other. I mean, so it was getting kind of chilly, and evidently I covered up somehow my yellow star. And the next day, the gendarmes, like the police, came and arrested me. And I said, why? And my dad just, beside himself, what did she do? And she didn't wear her yellow star. So somebody turned me in because my star didn't show. And I was, they took me, they handcuffed me, and they took me to jail. It was about 8 miles from where I lived, and they kept me about 3 days. And you imagine, I was not quite 19, and and I begged them to, just let me out. I have to take care of my dad, but they wouldn't. But finally, and I don't know. I think that my dad must have bribed this woman who used to work for us. Actually, she was kind of housekeeper, but not, previously. And she somehow walked the 8 miles and they released me to her. And nobody ever told me that. What my dad do, but I have a feeling that he had, that he bribed the authorities, and somehow that's how they let me out. Now, if my I always think about that when I had a little granddaughter, and when she heard, she was only about 3 or 4. It just to illustrate to you the difference between the thinking in this country. And when she heard her parents talking about me and about Auschwitz, she wanted to know what it was. And my son said, oh, it's something like a prison. And she was just petrified, a little girl. And she just screamed, and she says, what did my grandma do that she was put in prison? It's just it that you didn't have to do anything, and that's, just any little thing. There were some good people and very few, and I'd be forever grateful. But and when you're the one that asked me about us being the only Jewish family, there was on the outskirts of town, there was another couple. A man was Jewish and married one of the town's girls, and she converted. And she was with us. I mean, they were both taken and to Auschwitz, and I got really reacquainted. I knew them, but not very well. And we were going to stay together. They had a daughter who was my age, and we became really close friends in camp. And we went clear to Auschwitz. I mean, we were in the same barrack. But then when I left to move in with my sister, she wouldn't come with me. She said, I ought to make friends. I'm not playing with my my life, or I don't want to take a chance on it. God put me here. I'm going to stay. And later, a few days later, I went to visit her. You know, we were still in the same camp, but different buildings, but huge. I mean, there's just hundreds of them. And I looked for her, and there was nobody. It was completely empty. And later, and through history and through other sources, I found out that they needed room for more arrivals. So one night they just took all these thousands of women and gassed them because they didn't have room for the new arrival. So she never made it. Neither did her parents. They were both gassed, and she was a Christian woman. But
Do you want to take 2 more questions?
I can take whatever
Okay,
the people.
right over here.
It's only 8 o'clock.
Okay.
Oh no, I'm doing
You're doing
fine.
okay.
I know that's no problem.
Okay.
Through everything that you went through, did you ever lose faith? And did you regain it if you lost it?
No, I just. I just swallowed wrong.
That's so easy. It's okay.
Okay.
She swallowed some water.
Okay.
No, I'll be fine. No, it's very, very hard. Very hard to have faith. That's what you asked me?
Uh-huh.
I said, I still have my doubts. And, it's amazing that it either made people even more religious or like me, that I just can't believe that there could be a God and stood still to see all that. It's very hard. But, I'm still sort of torn because I was brought up with a lot of, faith. We were not religious, but we were, like everybody else. I mean, believed in God, and I always thought that I would see my mother up in heaven. But now I do have doubts.
Right here.
I know it's very difficult to forgive, but it's supposed to release, any hatred or anything in you if you're able to forgive them. Have you had a very long journey doing that?
Well, actually, I blame the people who stood by and didn't do anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
Right, I would too.
Yeah.
I would too.
Including the administration of that, American, because I think they are just as guilty.
Right over here.
You kept saying how naive you were about the Nazis and what they were going to do. Do you feel like your father was as naive, or do you feel like...
I'm sure he wasn't, but he made me think, or that things will work out. He was pretty religious. He prayed every morning. He got up at 4 o'clock in the morning and he prayed for hours. So, but toward the end, it was, we didn't even talk about it.
Yeah, right here.
Can you elaborate, can you talk a little bit more about the gypsies? What happened to you said the gypsies died at a certain time. Can you elaborate any more about the gypsies being in the camp? Or?
Well, actually, it's mostly history that proves it with dates and everything when it happened, and they were also. I mean, they were. I don't think that they were taken from Hungary so much, but they were. These were German gypsies, and they were put in concentration camp, but they kept the families together, them as workers, but at the end, anybody that had some kind of a physical disability or, according to Hitler, nobody should live. Nobody had a right because only blue-eyed, blondes were supposed to be inhabit the world, and that's what he was working on. And that's and gypsies were probably the most hated after the Jews of all the nations. And
Do we have any questions in the back? We don't want to leave anybody out. Okay, question. Go ahead.
As a war bride, do people ever look down on you because you are a war bride?
As a war bride, did people ever look down on you as a war bride?
No, no. First, I only found goodness and accepted. I think I got more discrimination as a divorcee, in this country than at that time, in the 1940s.
Yeah.
And so that's the only time that I felt that I was discriminated, but not, no, I think it's still the most wonderful country on earth, as far as I'm concerned.
Right over here.
Yeah. After everything that you've went through and that you have seen, and you've lived in this country now, do you see a similarity
Yeah, I see.
between the abortion in this country now, because there's too many people, as compared to what went on over there?
Well, I hate to tell you that this is so political that I really don't want to answer.
Other questions? Yes, right here.
In the news recently, it was reported that a 91-year-old woman who was a radio operator in Auschwitz is being charged with 260,000 counts of murder. I was wondering if you have read that report?
No.
And how you feel about officers or workers in the camp that are ultimately tried for their crimes.
Well, I feel there was a lot of injustice in the sentences, and the Americans were too lenient toward them, and it's just. But you want to repeat that? That she was charged with what?
The report said she was charged with 260,000 counts of murder. I do not know how they came up with that number, but it reported that, and she's being tried as a juvenile because she was only 20 at the time, even though she's 91 now. And that was just recently reported in the news.
Yeah, I haven't heard that. But, there was a lot of, like I said, injustice, and because everybody, as soon as they just followed orders, and nobody wanted to admit, but they were so willing.
Way in the back.
Do you know what the poison in those bombs was?
Do you know what the poison in those bombs was?
No, I don't.
Yes, over here.
I'm curious about when you got your U.S. citizenship, did you have to disclose that you were a Jewish immigrant, and did that inhibit you from getting your U.S. citizenship quickly?
Well, no, first of all, was married to an American citizen, and I didn't have any trouble. I did have to take the test, but you know, I had no problem.
Okay, right here.
Yeah.
Did you come straight from New York right to Council Bluffs? And so here then?
Yes.
In 40s, late 40s?
Yeah, well, he was a native of Council Bluffs.
1947.
1947.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, why Council Bluffs? Out of curiosity.
Oh, yeah, because my husband was born and raised here.
My husband was born and raised. Cool.
Other questions that anybody has? In the back.
So I think I missed the very beginning of the introduction, but is this your first time doing a public speaking event? And if it is not your first time, have you considered going to the public schools and speaking to the school children about this?
Yeah, I've been speaking since '09, and I am usually speak at schools, mostly in Nebraska. Some I have done in Colorado, and at universities, at one university, and my energy is just won't allow me, because I could probably speak every day.
Yeah.
Can you comment on how students receive what you're giving them? How do they respond?
It is unbelievable. You know, sometimes once the letters, I have probably 500 letters or more. That how it changed their lives. They waited. I spoke at South High in April, and those kids waited in line. I mean, like the length of this whole room, just to touch me. And I don't feel like, you know, I'm a hero, but I had so many of them that even though they heard me somewhere else, and I spoke in another town, and then they came. They wanted to hear it again.
In the back.
Have you been videotaped for posterity in the future? That we can share your story?
No, I didn't hear it.
We were told that somebody tonight was going to videotape this.
It is audio recorded.
So I think there might be several, in fact. So we'll meet them afterwards. Okay. Other questions that you have? Yes.
Yes. Did you have any physical effects from the poison in the bombs and having malnutrition?
No, I seem to have recovered. You know, I recovered.
Do you ever think of writing a book? Have you written a book?
I don't have any talent for writing. I don't even have any talent to speak. No, I never. I mean, yeah, people are asking me, but I need a ghostwriter.
You have a question?
She wants to know how she can send her a letter about what she heard tonight.
She wants to send a letter concerning what she heard tonight. This girl right here.
Oh, this little girl?
Right here.
Oh, that touches me deeply, really. That's wonderful.
So you can touch base with Kitty afterwards. Okay. Any last questions? Yes, in the back.
Did you go back to Auschwitz again, you said?
Did you go back to Auschwitz again?
About 4 times.
4 times.
How was the feelings when you got there?
Well, you know, pretty emotional, of course. And each time I went back, because I took my children, my husband, different times. And I feel, to me, like whole Europe is that I'm walking in a cemetery. Every step I take, I feel, because it wasn't just Auschwitz. There were so many other camps and so many other places where they used other methods. Like when I'm in Budapest and I see or read what they did, they lined them up on the there's a river called Danube that runs through Budapest, and they lined them up on the bank of the Danube, and tied, they had to hold something like to keep them together, or to hold hands. I don't remember now how it was, but they shot them and then they fell in the river. And there's a book about it called When the Danube Ran Red. It's there's so many. Well, even in Auschwitz, when they ran out of room and time to kill them, and there were hundreds of thousands of murders a day. And from what I read and what history shows, that they just piled up they didn't have enough room to in the crematorium. That's what they were short on. There weren't that many ovens, and so they just piled up the bodies and burned them. I mean, it's just so horrible to imagine how their methods. It's like I said, Auschwitz was probably the most famous, probably the biggest, camp. But it's just all. I just feel like it's a cemetery.
Yes, right over here, Miss.
Do you plan on speaking again anytime soon for those that were unable to make it tonight?
Well, yeah. Like I said, I have a lot of health problems, and until that straightens out, I probably won't do any more speaking for a while. But I hope to get back to it. And
You stay in contact, aside from the one time you went back to Germany for the reunion, or however many times, do you stay in contact with anybody from there?
well, actually, I have for a long time, and I had actually some. For a long time, we corresponded, Christmas cards and so forth. But it kind of faded away.
Yes, over here. Oh, your hand's not raised. Okay. Just trying to pick out. I don't want to leave anybody out. Yes, over here.
You told us about your parents and you told us about your siblings. Did you have any other cousins or relatives that experienced some of the family's experience?
Tell you, I think at one point I counted 87 family members. Distant, not too distant. There's a word for it. Family members like aunts and uncles. Most of them perished. It's in the 80s. I have, no cousins left, or very, very few. One or two here and there in the family, but the general rule is that all families just were destroyed, just killed. So like all good things have to come to an end, huh? I can't tell you my gratitude for all of you who stayed to listen to my gruesome story, and I appreciate all of you coming in. I can't thank you enough.
Thank you, Kitty.